Welcome to the Fantasy Formula 1 podcast, where we use fake money to buy real F1 teams to win imaginary points. I'm Paul, that's Ben, and this is an all-audio podcast instead of the video.
Right, so you'll notice that when he goes, I'm Paul, that's Ben, he was actually pointing at me. I am here in the room with him right now. So, you know, we've been, if you've been following along for the last couple of weeks, first of all, thank you. Second of all, you've probably noticed our video quality either degrading or camera angles changing. While we're chasing that down and figuring that all out, we're stripping things down and rolling with the technical difficulties.
Absolutely, and speaking of rolling with difficulties, perfect segue into the race this last weekend.
Yes.
Without further ado, if you didn't miss it, Lando Norris and Max Verstappen literally crashed into each other racing for P1 in the last F1 race.
Yeah, and again, if you this is your first time tuning in with us, we got two hats that we wear on this podcast. Not literal hats, figurative hats that we wear in our imaginations. One is a spectator hat, and when we're wearing that hat, you watch this race, you go, oh my gosh, what a thrilling, incredible, fantastic race. This is what we watch F1 for. This is why we wake up. We want to see the fights. We want to see the high drama. But when we put that fantasy hat on, we go, holy crap, this was the worst race ever, because the two most expensive drivers that I cleared a lot of space just to be able to afford ruined my entire week.
Yes, and honestly damaged the rest of the season for us both. And everybody else who had them, because like Lando Norris, I first off, for my three main teams, I used Limitless and I used the 3X chip.
Yep, and there's a very specific reason why that's backed by data and science and math. If you were with us last week, we identified that this was the best week to use those chips, because you've got a course that has minimal turns, maximum DRS zones, and it's a sprint weekend, which means if you use those chips, this is your chance to maximize your points.
Absolutely. And it was working.
Yeah. And Max Verstappen is still Max Verstappen. And we've been seeing McLaren become this dominant and rising force that you'd be an idiot not to pay attention
Absolutely.
to.
And it still holds true for next week.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You know what? If you had McLaren on you, if you had Lando and McLaren, you were not an idiot this week, and you won't be next week. This was just one of those any given Sunday freak incident days that, you know, anything can happen.
And this week it did.
And it happened this week, which it sucks. But, you know, that's, again, you hate and love the unpredictability.
Right. But you did walk me off the ledge a little bit. So I had Norris 3X in one team and Norris 2X with the DRS in another team.
Yeah.
And the fact that he qualified, so where do you go? He got, where's his qualifying position? Second. So he qualified second. And since he retired from the race so late, he only finished 20th. So
that's true. And so you're saying
so he lost 18 positions.
Correct. So he lost the opportunity for points, but he did not lose you points.
Yes. But you went negative 18 points on him for positions lost instead of negative 20
correct.
for DNF.
This was merely a terrible weekend, not a catastrophic weekend if you had Lando Norris, because between not DNFing and his performance in the sprint, he still netted you 13 points. For his price point, he should get you so many more points. And again, if he is on your team, I will bet good money that you put the DRS 2X on him at least.
For sure.
And so yeah,
for sure.
It was bad, but it could have been so much worse.
And so Max was able to limp back to the pits and he finished fifth.
Yeah.
All right, so that's, I mean, good for him, man. If you watch the replay of that pit stop, that was fast. He came in with 3 of his 4 tires. They got some softs on him, and he was out the door.
Well, you know, let's talk a quick Red Bull talking point here.
Oh gosh,
that, you know, Max Verstappen collides with another car technically twice if you watch closely, and then the intentionality of that second impact is debatable if you want to go to the bar and get angry about something. But despite that, he still beat his teammate by three positions.
3 positions. Yeah, he was handily ahead of Sergio Perez. And speaking of beating Sergio Perez, hey, and this is obviously set up because we talked about it beforehand. We all watched the race. Hey, Ben, guess who also beat Sergio Perez?
I don't know, Paul. Who?
Nico Hülkenberg on merit.
Haas beats a Haas car beats a Red Bull car on merit.
A Haas car beat a Red Bull car on merit, and this opens up so many conversation points. Before we get to actually Sergio Perez himself, it was all last year. Everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, is it the car or is it Max?" And this is a conversation, a talking point I stole from the talking heads on F1 TV, right? Is it Max or is it the car? Is it Max or is it the car? And last year was like, oh, it's really just the car because Red Bull's so dominant, right? It's just the car. Max is a savant level good. But now this year, it's, yes, Max is savant level good, and that's what's, keeping him at the top. But frick, man, Perez is what, 8th, getting passed by a Haas. So I'm questioning, and this is what I want your opinion on.
Sure.
I would say it's no longer the car, it's the driver. So I would say Red Bull is at least as good as McLaren, but McLaren might be better than Red Bull.
Interesting.
And so since you have Max in the cockpit, Max is still winning, or at least wheel to wheel with Lando Norris.
Yeah.
Sergio Perez is back competing with Haas for P8.
Well, that's the beauty of this podcast is we can speculate endlessly and we use minimal data to identify trends.
Absolutely.
But you know what? I think that, increasingly we are seeing a hard to argue against trend of Sergio Perez's declining performance. And
at least the car stops the car stopped being the key factor that put everything over the edge for him.
Sure.
Is he actually declining? Because I remember they said at the beginning, and how about this? I agree that the trends are declining. I completely agree with that. But I know they said at the beginning of the year that, where if in 2023, the race time that Max got the pole with in Bahrain would have got him 8th this year in 2024.
Sure.
So all the cars have advanced that much. And if all the cars have advanced that much, maybe they've caught up with Red Bull, then is Sergio Perez just as good as Sergio Perez has ever been? And because now the car doesn't matter as much, or is he actually declining?
So he's very interesting to me because I think so much of his performance is dependent on qualifying.
That's true.
Because I think one thing we pointed out before, and it certainly held true today this weekend in Austria, is where he qualifies, he will likely remain.
That's a good point.
And so when you have the dominant car in a Red Bull car earlier in a season, or when the upgrades come out and all of a sudden Red Bull's like the pullback car that just goes all the way across the kitchen floor before anything else can roll there. He'll be your P2 guy. He'll qualify well. He'll put a comfortable cushion for Max with from everybody else. But if he qualifies, something bad happens, he qualifies P11, he's going to qualify around P11, P9, P10.
And that's a perfect another segue into this next, maybe unpopular opinion, that as soon as you're investing into a team, like you have to have, like this just solidifies for me, you have to have McLaren instead of Red Bull on your team, because McLaren has 2 drivers still that are still fighting for the points. Red Bull doesn't. McLaren still has Piastri and Lando.
Yeah.
Like Red Bull and Ferrari has 2 drivers, Mercedes has 2 drivers,
exactly.
McLaren has 2 drivers, Red Bull has 1.
And we we identified that it's better to have we I think it was the previous week, it was Max in first place, and then Perez in 7th place. It's better to have 1st and 7th than it is to have 5th and 6th.
Completely agree. And keep in mind, everybody, this is for fantasy F1 we're talking about now. Like, be a fan of Sergio Perez, absolutely. Be a fan of Red Bull, absolutely. I still wear their jerseys, right, when I watch the show.
Oh, for sure.
Like, and Sergio Perez, I really hope he stays in F1 for the next 100 million years. Like, this isn't any dig on him or any of these other drivers, but Sergio Perez's price point is, what is Sergio Perez's price point?
Here's a question. As you're checking that, I want to see whether it went up or down this week.
Ooh,
because he consistently still goes up. It's by that minimal interval of 0.1 mil, but
so he went up by 0.1 mil.
I don't get that.
See, that's so
because Red Bull is still the dominant constructor, but again, it lives by having a dominant driver, and then someone else who's somewhere in the higher middle of the pack, and he continues to slowly work his way down that middle of the pack.
He does. And so for points wise, Sergio Perez has 198 points, and he is worth 22.6 million. He just went up by 0.1. George Russell, the last race winner, arguably because number 1 and number 2 took themselves out.
Yep.
But he is worth 21.4, and that's up 0.3. From previous weeks. So right now Sergio Perez is worth more than Lewis Hamilton, and he has more points. I get it, But my thing is with Sergio Perez, the fact that he is worth 22.6 and he's back in the pack with the Haas's, make him worth 10 million. I have him on my team left and right.
Right.
Make him worth put him in at Lando Norris. Sorry, not Lando Norris. At Fernando Alonso at 16.5.
Yeah.
I would have him on my team all day.
Oh, for sure.
Because that would free up $5 million or $6 million, and that would be great. But as soon as you have him in at the same price as all the other, Mercedes and Ferrari and all of this drivers, the points just aren't there. And to have Sergio Perez on your team excludes so many other options when Perez isn't bringing in the fantasy points.
Well, that's the thing. I think a couple of constructors are catching up to Red Bull in terms of engineering prowess and vehicle build.
Okay.
I do think, though, there's still a significant jump between a Red Bull car and an Aston Martin.
Completely agree.
So that's where I think his price point does hang so far above.
So
Fernando Alonso.
he has that capability.
Yes.
Like there's that potential, kind of like why all last year Ferrari was so expensive when they didn't accomplish much, because in the end they were still in a Ferrari.
Correct.
And all this year Mercedes value stayed in the low 20s because they're a Mercedes. They have that capability to do it. They're just not.
Right.
And as soon as you slash the value of any of the Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, or Red Bull in half, everybody's going to throw them on their team.
Sure.
And it's going to basically neutralize them.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I got you.
No, that makes sense.
So,
that makes sense.
And, and that being said, though, before you said, it was arguable that, George Russell would not have won had not the collision happened. I think we can go a little bit beyond that. I think this would have been a Lando Max 1 and 2 race regardless, and it would have been congratulations to George for making the podium.
Absolutely.
And beating out a lot of other solid drivers.
Completely agree.
I was cracking up just because this week for George Russell is like the quintessential Ricky Bobby parallel, where it's at the very end and Ricky Bobby and Jean Girard have gotten out of their cars and are automatically disqualified. So Cal Naughton Jr. wins by default, and he goes, "I realize I won just purely on a technicality, but I'll tell you what, if you try to take the trophy away from me, I'll punch you in the mouth."
Yeah.
That was the win for George.
That was great.
Listen, no one can take it away that he's got 2 Grand Prix wins. That's got to be one of the best feelings in the world. But it was a highly circumstantial win.
Oh gosh, yeah. But no, he was the one there, bro.
He was the one there, and he's in a Mercedes car.
Yep.
And so, do you want to talk now a little bit about, is Mercedes who we thought they were?
Yeah, let's talk about this. So,
okay,
if you're a friend of the podcast, which thank you for being one, you will know that leading up to this hat trick of races, right? Yeah, 2 weeks ago, last week, and this upcoming week. I was so stoked about Ferrari. They had a really bad week where they took a double DNF, and then their value dropped. And I was like, man, here we go. Here's your chance to get into Ferrari cheap. Once they sort themselves out, they're going to go right back up to the top, keep competing again. Their price is going to continue to climb to match McLaren and Red Bull. Now's your chance to get into Ferrari. Yeah. And I stood by that, and I was stoked, and I literally fashioned 2 of my 3 team builds around that principle, right?
Yeah.
One staying with McLaren. But dang, dude, I'm man enough to say when I was wrong. I think I might have been wrong because it's not panning out for them. Their issues, Ferrari's issues aren't going away. And the unforeseen thing that I didn't take into account is the fact that Mercedes would learn how to race again.
Sure.
Okay, so now you have Ferrari that took that little back step, and now they're trying to fill that void right beneath Red Bull and McLaren. But now, Ferrari is trying to fill that void right beneath Red Bull and McLaren, but Mercedes, I think, is handily in it.
I wholeheartedly agree, but I wouldn't be as hard on yourself as you appear to be being right now. I think Ferrari is still solid.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's tough is you don't. Okay, I'm sure people will have a very differing opinion, but I feel like you don't have a clear-cut winning driver between Sainz and Leclerc in terms of. I'm sorry, I think the gap between them is much closer.
I agree.
And that in any given week,
either one can win.
You're not an idiot for choosing Leclerc or Sainz.
True,
but one of them will have an issue, and that's
true,
and that's a scary thing, because here we're bashing Ferrari a little bit. But they still ended up on the podium.
Yeah.
And this is the first time for Sainz back on the podium since Monaco. So good for them, top 3. But now you look at Leclerc, who got 11th.
Right, and what happened?
And it appears to me mechanical issues. Again, it's one of those.
Yeah, he was in the pits like 3 times in the first 10 laps.
Yeah,
or something like that.
I don't think I don't think we're charting the decline of Charles Leclerc.
Agreed.
At all.
No, not at all. This is just they're going through a teething phase. They're going through a rough spot.
Correct.
While they sort stuff out.
Yeah, and so I don't think it's so much that Ferrari's on the decline, so much as that Mercedes has figured some things out. They had a come to Jesus moment, and I think they are getting to the point where they're equivalently competitive with Ferrari.
Okay.
I think you've got I think 2 weeks ago I would have said it's a clear cut Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
And then everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm sorry. There are other tiers, but we don't need to rehash that.
No.
I think at this point, I am comfortably saying it's still Red Bull despite Perez,
because it's Red Bull because of Max Verstappen.
It's Max Verstappen, McLaren, and then interchangeably Ferrari or Mercedes at this point.
I agree with the interchangeable Ferrari and Mercedes. I would say since you have to pick 2 constructors, you pick McLaren straight up, and you pick Mercedes over Ferrari based on the last couple weeks.
Why not both?
Why not
the question,
both?
Because so here's what happened with my teams. I had my alpha team. I went constructors. I went Red Bull and I went Ferrari, which immediately cuts down my driver budget. So I had one Ferrari driver. It was Sainz.
Okay,
and then all I could the next best driver I could afford was Alonso, and then bottom of the barrel budget drivers, which didn't hurt me. And because I used my 3x on Sainz and then 2x on Alonso, I still netted over 200 points, which isn't great for using your 3x. On my second team, that was my full McLaren team, which wasn't a stupid build, but it just happened to be the worst week ever for that because I lost Lando.
Yeah.
On my third and much more experimental team, the Stathams, I tried this where I had I had Ferrari as a constructor and I had Mercedes as a constructor, and then I had Sainz as a driver and I had Russell as a driver, which just lucked out, and I ended up netting 311 points with what was my just throw it at the wall and see what sticks team, and
it stuck well.
Yeah, so. Again,
I just pulled it up. Yeah, and you had Kevin Magnussen.
Yeah, and I had Magnussen who got me 16 points as well. And then Sargent who
didn't DNF.
Who didn't DNF, so he got me 0. And that's what you want him on the team
what
for.
Are those? Yeah, how did he?
And then Zhou Yu who got me 2 points, which again at that point that's fine. But that just speaks to me of Ferrari's still real, and Mercedes is legit. Now let's next week I won't have the 3x. So that won't be worth nearly as much, and Russell just happened to win, and so but ultimately he still would have netted me about 30 points.
Yeah,
which ain't bad.
Not bad at all. And after you use the 2x on him, you had 86 points on Russell and 76 points on Mercedes.
Yeah,
that ain't too shabby, man.
No, I'll take it.
Go Russell.
And so moving forward, Mercedes is in the conversation for my constructor. Absolutely. At least.
Yeah, and for my teams as well. Let me click over here for my teams. We're looking at. I do have. I went against what I've been told to do because I'm going to be on holiday and we're recording next week's remotely.
Go back to your completed because right now you're looking at race weekend for Great Britain.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
So completed for there we go. So yeah, so I had for my big push, my limitless team, I had Max Verstappen, which got me 50 points for and then Lando Norris got me 13. I had Lewis Hamilton, and I had George Russell, which is all good.
Oh, did you really?
I did for my limitless.
Your limitless.
This is my limitless. Yeah. So I ended up still getting 256 off of limitless. But man, that Lando Norris should have really paid me off. I should have been.
So should have Max.
Yeah. See, because as soon as Mac, I'm just burning. But going forward with let me go to current day. So going forward, if you notice on my teams, 2 of my 3 teams still have Lando Norris and still have McLaren.
And you probably don't notice it because we're audio only.
Yeah,
today.
Right.
So we'll spell it out here for you too, real quick. Is Norris Zogan Yu, Kevin Magnussen, Esteban Ocon, and Yuki Tsunoda. I don't know why I went first and last names each time.
But those are the core drivers to have.
Yeah.
Right? Both
no,
Haas
for sure.
drivers, your Esteban Ocon and Yuki Tsunoda. Yuki Tsunoda, Jogan Yu.
This is the quintessential build for if you're going with a formula of 2 solid constructors, 1 solid driver, and then the rest is reliable filler.
Exactly. You can't do Jogan Yu, Yuki Tsunoda, both Haas, and Esteban Ocon. Like those are the 5 drivers really to pick from for your solid core. And then I have Lando Norris and McLaren. And then basically 2 identical teams, except one team has Mercedes, the other team has Ferrari, because they're both for the secondary constructor. And then the third team is for Mercedes and Ferrari with Sainz and Russell. And then I couldn't afford Esteban Ocon, so I went with, or I couldn't afford Esteban Ocon, Yuki Tsunoda, or Kevin Magnussen, so I alternated them out for Logan Sargent. So I have Hulkenberg, Jogan Yu, and Logan Sargent for the filler.
Yep.
If anybody followed that, good job, because I know I'm talking really fast and there's no imagery. But so that's where we're at looking for, because keep. I know you've hit this point home several times. Keep McLaren, keep Lando Norris. If you're backing Red Bull, keep Max Verstappen. Absolutely, he's good. Be wary of Red Bull Racing as a constructor, because they're worth just south of $30 million. Is about a third of your freaking budget. And Sergio Perez, and I know he's doing great racing, he's not putting in the fantasy points.
And that's just it. As we're looking through this, if we're summarizing, if you have Mercedes, you're not wrong. If you have Ferrari, you're not wrong. If you have McLaren, you're not wrong. If you have Red Bull, you're not wrong, as long as nothing happens to Max.
Yeah.
With all of those other constructors, something can go wrong with one of those drivers, and you're still going to net some solid points.
Exactly. Lando goes out, Piastri gets second.
Yeah.
Sainz, makes podium, Leclerc finishes 10, right? Russell goes ahead and was on the podium, scoops in for a win, and Lewis Hamilton finishes wherever Lewis Hamilton finishes.
Yep.
I forget where he finished.
Fourth.
See,
yeah.
Okay, so right off the podium.
You got first and fourth for Mercedes.
So for all the other ones, you have your 2 drivers, but for Red Bull, if Max Verstappen's not in it, then, and this is me being a little cheeky, but Sergio Perez is back there boxing with the Haas's for, still honest points, top 10. Like, that's good.
Yeah.
But for the $22 million, for the quarter of your budget that he takes, probably not just worth it,
Yeah.
So what, so this is, again, coming up as the 3rd race in a 3-race string. We've talked about my team. Ben, what changes are you going to make to your team
honestly
going forward?
Not
None.
Not much.
Station keeping.
I look at that, harkening back to our
there we go,
our military days.
Yeah, right.
Again, I don't feel stupid for the teams I put together. It was just kind of an abysmal comedy of errors for the drivers.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna, well, actually, the one change I'm gonna make is I'm definitely putting more of a Mercedes presence on my primary team.
Agreed.
And I'm going to see how much I can afford to have both Mercedes and either Ferrari or McLaren moving forward here. So so my big foot stomp moment is Mercedes is real.
Yes.
And they are they're only slightly cheaper than Ferrari, but they're way cheaper than McLaren right now. So a Ferrari Mercedes team is going to do you well,
especially since we're only halfway through the season, or just halfway. So if as their value goes up, if Red Bull continues to drop off, there's lots more racing to come. So if you got kicked in the teeth like we did this weekend, don't worry about it. Still plenty of racing ahead. And we're about to get, after the mid-season break that's coming up, that's when you get into the dog days, where a lot of fantasy players just kind of throw in the hat. They use up their chips. They don't know what to do. They're getting bored. So if you really want to get to the top of your league, or still get into the top, single-digit percentages, like it's our goal to get in there and stay in. Man, I was going to be in the top 10,000 of the world. And, there's a lot of people in life, everybody, that'll say, I should have like the slow music playing in the background. There's a lot of people in life, everybody, that tell you all the stuff they could have done if things hadn't gone so horribly wrong in their lives. I'm one of those people saying I could have done really well this week if I hadn't done really horrible this week. But all right, cool. So, Ben, any parting shots or save rounds before we have this Man, don't look now, but it looks like our podcast is going to be a lot shorter if we just do audio only.
I think it is. I think so. What's interesting though, I think the takeaways are a lot more definitive than they typically are.
That's true. I bet that's
And
it.
so I'm going to enjoy this week because it looks like as the remainder of the season happens, the races are going to get closer and closer.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see a lot more Red Bull McLaren duels. But here's the thing: I think a lot more people are pulling in to be competitive here. So we're gonna see closer races. It's not going to be Max wins by 17 seconds and then everyone else licks their wounds.
And that's actually a really good point, because as soon as it is anybody can win, as soon as you literally have 4 teams where if Sergio Perez pulls out a win, none of us are going to be surprised. I mean, I'll be a little surprised, but it's not going to be like, oh my gosh, how do you ever do that?
Yeah.
Right? So you have Red Bull, you have McLaren, you have Ferrari, you have Mercedes, where if any one of them wins, we're like, all right, that kind of checks, which means it takes the burden off of us as fantasy players where you kind of hope, but like this week, as soon as McLaren has a bad week, we're not running around changing our team.
Oh, sure.
You know?
Yeah.
Or as soon as Ferrari has a great week, we're not, quick run to Ferrari, because Mercedes might have the better week next week.
Yeah. No,
You just pick your team and you hold for a little bit to see who starts to break out.
It's so much more fun of a game right now that there are too many good moves to make.
Ooh, that's a great way to look at it. Too many good moves.
It's not like, you found the one way in chess you can beat the other guy that you play with, all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, I just use that tactic and I'll win. No. The playing field is wide open right now.
I love it.
Oh, and actually, I do need to issue one apology. Last week we were talking about coming up with mid-season predictions, and I think we got so distracted by the by the craziness of this week that I know I didn't prepare anything.
I didn't either.
But based on this week alone, I will say this: before the end of the season, we will see an on-track fist fight. We're gonna have guys pull off to the side, and they're just gonna go at it, not in a sexual way, in like a fighting way,
right?
Yeah.
Because I was surprised. Like if this had been NASCAR here in the United States, I really think they would have found each other in the paddock and just gone.
Oh,
for it.
sure. Or if this was Hulkenberg and Magnussen 5 years ago,
Heyo.
yeah, but now they're buddies. They got the bromance going.
Now they're tight. Yeah.
Yep. All right.
All right.
Well, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.